The iron scraped shut like a blade through silence. You don't remember when the cold began, only that it never left. Stone walls sweat with damp. The straw beneath you is sour and crawling, and the chains at your wrists are rusted with the memory of others. In the corner, a man hums to himself. Not a tune, just a thread of sound, fragile as dust. Above you, light seeps in through a slit too narrow for dreams. This is not punishment, it is forgetting. And you, once a farmer, a daughter, a soul beneath a sky, you are no longer any of those things. You are a number. A silence. A shadow pressed against stone. You can cage a man, but you cannot chain the memory of warmth. Unknown prisoner. If this story settles heavy on your chest or flickers through your thoughts like candlelight, tell me, could you have survived such silence? Subscribe, share, or comment your reflections below. Your voice still matters here. The iron gate did not creak, it screamed. The sound that echoed, not just through the stone walls, but somewhere deeper, inside the pit of your chest. It closed behind you with the finality of thunder, sealing in the air, the light, and the last warm breath of the world outside. You turned once, instinctively, expecting perhaps a word, a face, a sign that this was not the end. But there was nothing. Just the clang of the bolt, and the slow breath of damp stone all around. Inside, the prison smelled of rust and piss and lye soap. Sharp, sour, and metallic. A scent that clung to the lungs, as if memory itself was trying to flee the place. A colonial officer stood beneath a cracked archway, barking orders with a voice polished by cruelty. His words were clipped and rehearsed. Like a line in a play you were not meant to understand, only to obey. You were herded forward like livestock. Shuffled past walls the color of bruised bone, past torches sputtering weakly in their brackets, past men who no longer looked like men. They watched you. Not with malice, not with welcome, but with something worse, indifference. Their eyes, hollowed by months or years, or lifetimes, held no spark. They didn't care who you were. Not your name, not your story, not your prayers. You were simply new, and soon, they knew, you would be like them. A number, a cough, a silence in the night. The boots of the guards struck the stone with ritual force, as if each step was a drumbeat meant to remind you you were no longer your own. Your clothes clung to your skin, damp from rain and sweat and fear. You still clutched your name somewhere in your mouth, somewhere behind your teeth, but already it felt slippery, like something you couldn't say out loud anymore. Your name belonged to the world beyond the gate. And the gate, now, was a memory. This is not a sentence, you whispered to yourself. The first words you'd spoken in hours. It's an erasure. You can cage a man, but you cannot chain the memory of warmth. Unknown prisoner. If this story settles heavy on your chest, or flickers through your thoughts like candlelight, tell me, could you have survived such silence? Subscribe, share, or comment your reflections below. Your voice still matters here. What part of this story stayed with you the most? The silence, the scent, or the moment your name began to vanish? The sky above the courtyard was low and grey. A dull shroud stretched taut with the threat of rain. You shuffled forward with the others, boots dragging through mud slick with ash and waste. A guard shoved you without looking. Ahead, the barracks loomed like rotted teeth. Squat buildings slumped against the perimeter wall. The stones bled water from their seams, seeping from years of storms and the breath of too many broken men. Inside the main hall, the light thinned. The torches smoked, casting wavering shadows that made the walls ripple. You saw carvings scratched into stone, names, curses, prayers, most half erased by time or scrubbed away by some obedient hand. A bird flitted once across the rafters, startled by your arrival. Or perhaps it wasn't real at all. You couldn't be sure anymore. They made you stand in a row. You weren't sure how many. 20, maybe 30, some barefoot, some missing teeth. One man swayed slightly, eyes flickering like a candle about to die. No one spoke. There was no murmuring, no sobbing, just the sound of breathing, and the distant rattle of something metallic being dragged across the floor. A young guard paced before you, reading off names you didn't recognize. One by one, men stepped forward, each vanishing behind a door, as heavy as a tomb lid. When he reached your name, your real name, you hesitated, just long enough for him to notice. His eyes met yours. He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. "You're late," he said, Not to you, but to the record book he carried. Then, without another word, he turned, and you followed. You passed through a narrow corridor with no windows, only slits cut into the stone that let in more shadow than light. You could feel the walls breathe, not metaphorically, but truly. They sweated, exhaled, groaned. They had seen too much. They had devoured too many stories like yours. The corridor opened into another courtyard, smaller, darker, cluttered with crates and broken tools. A man was sweeping, though the wind undid his work with every pass. He didn't look up. In the corner, another man sat on a low stool, mending shoes. His hands moved with strange precision, stitching soles as if time was still his to command. You were brought to a chamber with a high, arched ceiling, a single lantern dangling from a chain. The light swung gently, casting dizzying patterns over the bare stone floor. There, a clerk sat behind a desk, ink-stained and sleep-starved. He took one look at you and sighed. Another one, he muttered, dipping his pen. Name? He asked aloud, but it wasn't a question. He was already writing. You opened your mouth to speak it. You wanted to say it clearly, firmly, to anchor it to the air, but something caught in your throat. A rasp, a hesitation. The guard behind you answered instead. Doesn't matter. He's here now. The clerk nodded and scribbled something onto the page. Then he pointed to a side room where steam drifted under the doorframe and a pale light glowed. Next, you were pushed forward again. Inside, a bucket sat beside a cracked basin. The water smelled of lime and iron. A rough cloth hung on a hook. You were told to strip. The door shut behind you. Alone, you looked at your body in the haze. The welts, the bruises, the sunburned shoulders, the calloused hands. You remembered your wife tracing the curve of your ribs. You remembered a child's laugh. You remembered wind in tall grass. And then the door opened again. The prison had you now. It would begin its work, not with whips, not with chains, not yet, but with forgetting. And forgetting would start with your name. They do not speak to you. They speak at you. Strip? The command is as cold as the iron in their eyes. No room for hesitation. No softness in their tone. You move slowly, your fingers numb, not just from the chill in the air, but from disbelief. You peel off your clothing layer by layer, memory by memory, until you stand bare before strangers who do not care what name your mother whispered into your ear, or what songs you once sang while ploughing the earth. Your shirt is taken. Your boots, worn smooth from a lifetime of walking, vanish into a pile with others. They are thrown onto a heap of cloth that smells of lice and old sweat, where the identities of 100 men now rot in a shared, forgotten grave. A bucket of limb water is overturned beside you. It sloshes over your feet with a slap. A man with gloves scrubs at your skin like he's trying to erase something more than dirt, as if he can wipe away the years of freedom from your bones. He is thorough but not cruel. You wonder if that makes it worse. Beside him, another clerk waits, quill in hand, eyes unfeeling. He is not a man of violence, not like the ones with the rifles, but his pen is more final than a blade. Height, the clerk murmurs. A guard measures you with a stick, then calls out the number. Weight. You step onto a scale that wobbles beneath your bare soles. The guard squints, grunts, recites. More scratching. The sound of the pen moving over paper is rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock measuring how much life you still have left. Scars? You flinch. The guard does not wait for your answer. He spins you by the shoulders and begins to list them himself. Left rib, right thigh, knuckle, collarbone. He notes their shape, their size, their assumed origin. You feel more like an animal being catalogued than a man. Color. Eyes? Brown, the clerk says, before even looking. Skin? A pause. The clerk glances up, just long enough to make a decision. You are reduced to a word, a category, a code that will dictate your rations, your cellmate, your punishments. Crime? The room stills. You wait for them to ask you, to give you the dignity of speech, but no voice invites you to defend yourself. Petty theft, the guard says dryly. You want to scream. It wasn't theft. It was food. A sack of grain, taken after your landlord turned your family out. Your child was coughing up blood in the night. Your wife's hands trembling with hunger. It was survival. It was desperation. It does not matter. The ledger will not remember that. The clerk dips his pen again, scratches your supposed crime into the page like a priest, etching sin into the air. You glance down and see the book is thick with names. Columns of men now vanished into brick and shadow. The ink is faded in places, smudged by damp, or blood, or both. Some lines end with crosses. You do not ask what they mean. A number is read aloud. So that is you now. 4, 2, 6. It hangs in the air like a noose. The guard repeats it as he writes it onto a scrap of cloth. Large, black letters hastily stitched with thread. He ties it around your arm, then fastens another to your chest. The number is not aligned. It sags slightly, like something ashamed to be worn. You are handed clothing, if it can be called that. Rough linen, stained and stiff. The fabric scrapes your skin. You remember how once, long ago, your mother stitched soft cuffs into your shirts to keep the cold from sneaking in. Now, the cold is welcome. It's the scraping of this cloth that burns. Someone, another prisoner perhaps, hands you a sack. Inside, a spoon, a tin bowl, and a louse-infested blanket folded thin from use. You hold it awkwardly, like a baby you do not recognize. The guard, who has been silent until now, finally speaks. You belong to Her Majesty now, he says, almost bored. Remember that. You do not reply. You are not sure if the silence is resistance or surrender. Perhaps both. As you are led down a corridor, you catch a glimpse of another man shackled, face bruised, one eye swollen shut. He looks at you and smiles. It is not a friendly smile. Fresh meat, he mutters. You flinch, and the guard behind you jabs your spine with the butt of his rifle. No talking. The hallway seems to stretch on forever. Gas lamps flicker behind iron grates, casting shadows like bars across the walls. The scent shifts here, less urine, more mold. The kind of damp that never dries, the kind that breeds sickness in the lungs and rot in the soul. The walls narrow. You brush against stone slick with condensation, every step echoing with metallic clinks and murmurs. Somewhere above, you hear a scream, distant, muffled, long. No one reacts. You glance down at your chest, the number now replacing your name. 4, 2, 6. You try to whisper your true name to yourself, just under your breath, just to keep it alive. But the words don't come. Your mouth has gone dry. Your throat aches with silence. This is not justice. This is theatre. A ritual of humiliation, carefully choreographed, designed not merely to punish, but to dismantle. And the worst part? You sense it's working. The corridor curves like a snake, slithering deeper into the bowels of the prison. Each step you take is accompanied by the rasp of your breath, and the irregular slap of bare feet against damp stone. You are not alone. Others walk ahead of you, some with shoulders hunched in defeat, others stiff with fear, but none speak. Words are fragile things here, brittle, easily broken, and rarely worth the risk. You clutch your tin bowl and the lice-ridden blanket like they are talismans, not because they offer comfort. They don't, but because they are yours now, the last remnants of anything that might belong to you. At the end of the hall, a heavy iron door waits. Not ornate, not fearsome, just final. A worn brass number hangs beside it, swinging slightly as if disturbed by ghosts. The guard beside you mutters something under his breath, unfastens the latch, and swings the door open with the groan of rusted hinges. You hesitate. The threshold feels like the edge of a cliff. He pushes you. Inside, the room swallows you whole. It is a square of stone and shadow, bare walls, no bed, just straw piled in the corner, more grey than yellow, crawling softly with motion. The air is dense, thick with mildew, old blood, and breath. A single slit of light filters in from a gap high above the wall, casting a narrow beam like a judge's finger. It's not enough to see by, only enough to remember that light exists. The door slams shut behind you. You jump at the sound, your heart knocking against your ribs like a prisoner in its own cell. Then silence follows, not quiet, but true, heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that has weight, that presses into your ears and makes you question if you've gone deaf. There is movement in the far corner. A rustle, then a voice, low, hoarse, almost a whisper. New one. You turn and see him. just a shape at first. A man folded into the stone like a shadow made flesh. His knees are pulled to his chest. His hair is matted. His eyes catch the faint light and glimmer with a strange, tired warmth. He does not ask your name. He knows better. What they get you for, he asks. Not unkindly. You don't answer. The words die before they form. He nods, as if this too is an answer. I stole bread, he offers. 4 years ago, maybe 5 or 6. You wonder if he's mad. But perhaps this is what sanity looks like here. You lower yourself onto the straw. It crinkles faintly. The smell clings to your skin, sharp and sweet, like old milk. Something skitters away, a rat or a beetle. You don't look. You try to think of something solid, a memory to anchor you. But every time you reach for the image of your child's face, it blurs. Your wife's laughter too far now, the smell of cut hay, the feel of boots on dry earth, all fading. The man beside you clears his throat. They'll wake us at dawn, he says. Don't talk then, just follow. To where? He chuckles. A dry, cracked sound. To work, or to die. Depends on your luck. You lie back, the stone wall behind you is wet. You don't remember when you last laid flat. Your spine protests, hips sore already from the straw. You shift, trying to find some comfort, but comfort is not something you're allowed now. Above, the slit in the wall dims as night falls. The narrow ray vanishes. Darkness claims everything. And then the prayers begin. Softly, from somewhere down the hall, a murmur, just loud enough to carry words in a language you do not understand, but you know the rhythm. You've heard it in church pews, in funeral processions, a prayer not to be answered, but to be spoken, to remind yourself you're still a soul in a body, still something more than bones. The man beside you joins in, lips moving without sound. You remain silent. Later, when even the whispers have faded, you lie awake, counting the sounds of the prison, a cough from somewhere deep in the corridor, the scratching of claws, a moan, long and low, like wind through a broken window, and then silence again. Your number is stitched into your chest. You run your fingers over the coarse fabric, tracing the digits. 4, 2, 6. You repeat them in your head, like a litany, not because you want to remember them, but because there is nothing else left to say. Your name, once a thing spoken with affection, is now a secret, a fragile candle in the storm. You dare not light it yet. Sleep does not come easily. When it finally arrives, it drags you down like a hand around your ankle. You fall into it. No dreams. Just dark. Just absent. In the morning, when the door creaks open, and the guards begin shouting, you will rise. Not as a man with a past, not as a father or a husband, but as a numbered soul in the belly of a stone beast. And you will walk where they point, lift what they command, break under what they build. Because the moment the ledger claimed your name, the prison claimed your future. Before the light returns, the noise begins. It starts with a rattle, soft, metallic, like a whisper made of iron. Then another joins it, and another. Soon, the corridor outside your cell hums with movement. The scrape of boots against stone, the dragging of chains, the cough of old lungs waking to another day they did not ask for. The prison does not wake gently. It roars to life like an ancient machine grinding through bones and breath. You open your eyes to darkness still thick in the cell. No torch yet, no lamp. Just the faintest grey suggestion through the narrow slit in the wall. A sliver of morning sky. Beside you, your cellmate is already sitting upright. His eyes open, but they don't blink. You suspect he hasn't slept, or perhaps he no longer needs to. They'll take you out today, he says, voice rough with disuse. They always do, after the ledger. You sit up slowly, the straw clinging to your back. Your spine aches. Your knees crack. You feel older than you are, like the stone beneath you has leached something vital from your bones. The guard appears without warning. The door swings open. Not wide, just enough. Light spills in, not warm, not golden, but flat, pale, and damp, like all the world outside is made of wet wool. Out, the guard says. Just one word. Enough. You rise, bowl and blanket in hand. He gestures for you to leave them. You do. The cellmate nods to you. a tiny imperceptible farewell as you step into the corridor. Outside, the smell is stronger. A stew of rot, sweat, and soapstone. Prisoners line up in twos, backs straight, eyes low. Most wear the same numbered tunic you do. Some have boots, others nothing but rags wrapped around bleeding feet. A few wear irons, thick shackles at the ankles that force them to walk like broken horses. You are handed your own set of chains. Not heavy, but heavy enough. Cold cuffs snapped onto your wrists. A thin chain running from one ankle to the other, enough to slow you, to humble you. The clink is constant. With every step, it speaks. Not free, not yours, not yet. The yard is a sea of grey, faces blurred by grime and sun, and time. A man nearby hums under his breath. Not a song, not exactly, but a sound, a rhythm, a rebellion too small for the guards to punish, but loud enough to be defiance. You catch eyes with another prisoner. His cheeks are hollow, his lips cracked, but his gaze is sharp. He looks at you the way a wolf might study a limping deer. "Don't cry," he says. You blink, confused. You weren't. "Rats smell salt," he adds, then turns away. You don't ask what he means. You don't ask anything. You're beginning to understand that questions are dangerous here. Curiosity is weakness. Speaking is risk. Listening is survival. The line begins to move. Chains rattle in harmony. A chorus of the condemned. The sound is hypnotic. After a few steps, you stop noticing your own cuffs. You fall into the rhythm. Left, drag, right, clink. The cruel ballet of prison life. You pass a whipping post stained dark at the base. A guard stands beside it, chewing a root, watching the line pass with eyes that betray nothing. The smell there is different. Older. You don't linger. Past the post, the yard widens. You see prisoners bent under carts, hauling stone, dragging logs. Some hammer at nails without lumber. Others dig holes where nothing will be planted. The work isn't always useful. It doesn't have to be. It's not about labor. It's about obedience, about breaking the rhythm you once had, the rhythm of freedom, of choice, of rest. You are split off from the line, pushed toward the east wing. A group of 5 joins you. One is just a boy, maybe 16. His number hangs crooked on his tunic. He stumbles, and a guard strikes his leg with a baton. Up, the guard barks. The boy rises, limping. No one helps him. Helping is not the way here. You arrive at a tool shed, if it can be called that. It's a lean-to of warped planks, with rusted hinges and a slanted roof. Inside are shovels, picks, axes. Most are dull, some are bloodstained. You're handed a spade. The wood is smooth from years of use. You feel the ghosts of hands in its grain. "North trench," says the overseer. "Dig 6 feet. For what?" Someone asks. The answer is a blow to the stomach. The man doubles over. No one speaks again. You are led to the trench. A strip of dirt, carved into the prison's edge, beside the stone wall topped with iron spikes. You begin to dig. The earth is hard. Packed clay and rock. It does not yield easily. By midday, your arms are numb, your palms blistered. Sweat soaks your tunic, dripping into your eyes. Burning. You hear coughing behind you, dry, desperate. Someone is wheezing too hard to lift his shovel. A guard moves closer, finger brushing the trigger of his musket. The man keeps digging. A bell rings. Lunch. A bowl of gruel is thrust into your hands. It smells like nothing. Tastes like less. You eat it slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because you know the hunger will return too soon. A fly lands on the rim of your bowl. You do not swat it away. Around you, others do the same, eating with the grim reverence of men who know the bowl may not be full tomorrow. After the meal, you return to the trench. Your back burns. Your breath shortens. The sun, though pale, scalds your neck like judgment. A guard approaches near sundown. He looks at the depth of your trench. He frowns. "Too shallow." He spits. "Start again tomorrow." You nod. He nods back, as if satisfied. As if this failure, this punishment is a ritual both of you understand. Chains clink again. You are led back in line, back into the corridors that no longer feel foreign. The walls close in, but not as tightly. The light fades. but not as cruelly. Inside your cell, your cellmate says nothing. You lie down on the straw, your hands shake, your stomach gnaws, your wrists burn from the cuffs. But sleep, somehow, comes easier tonight, because your body has begun to forget comfort, and your mind has begun to forget resistance. You are becoming what the prison wants you to be. Obedient, numbered, silent. The bell tolls before the sun has risen. Its sound is flat, metallic, like a knuckle against an empty pan. Yet, it carries through the halls like thunder, a summoning, not to prayer, nor to assembly, but to labor. You rise with aching limbs, the pain in your back now a familiar friend. Your fingers curl stiffly as if still gripping yesterday's shovel. Every muscle sings its own song of exhaustion. The corridor outside your cell is already alive. Shackles clink in chorus. Guards shout names and numbers like cattlemen sorting a herd. You are directed toward a different path today, not to the trench or the yard, but through a narrow gate on the far side of the compound. Beyond it lies a hill cloaked in morning fog. They call it the quarry. You have heard whispers. Men returning with torn palms and hollow eyes, their tunics soaked through with dust and blood. One man spoke of the noise, the endless hammering, the wail of stone under metal. Others refused to speak of it at all. Now, it is your turn. You pass under an archway scrawled with words in fading paint. Labor reforms the spirit. Beneath it, prisoners march with heads down, boots scraping against stone. The ground grows uneven, the walls thinning until there is only a fence, then nothing at all but hills and hard sky. The quarry is a scar upon the land, a vast pit of exposed stone, jagged cliffs where the earth has been torn open and left to bleed dust. Pale rock stretches in all directions, shattered and skeletal as if the bones of giants had risen from below. Tools are handed out at random. You are given a hammer and a chisel, both worn, their handles splintered, their metal dulled from years of use. The weight of them pulls at your arms even before you begin. A foreman points you to a line of rock, already cracked in places from past attempts. He gives no instruction beyond a glance. And then the noise begins. Hammers fall. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The air fills with the sharp ring of steel against stone, the groan of rock splitting, the grunts of men who dare not scream. The sound is endless, a roar, a chant, a punishment that burrows into your skull and stays there. You strike the stone, once, twice, again. The vibration shoots through your bones, jolting your elbows, numbing your wrists. The rock doesn't give, not at first, but you keep swinging. The rhythm overtakes you. Strike, breathe, strike, swallow dust, strike again. Your hands begin to blister. The skin peels. Blood darkens the handle, but still you continue, because stopping is not allowed. Because movement is the only thing between you and the lash. To your left, a man collapses. He slumps forward, his hammer clattering against the stone. A guard approaches, rifle slung lazily over one shoulder. He nudges the man with his boot. No response. The guard calls another prisoner over. Take his place. The man is dragged away. No one asks if he's alive. No one slows down. You keep striking. The sun crawls across the sky, offering no warmth, only glare, only sweat. Your clothes cling to you, soaked through with labor. The wind offers relief, but it carries the fine grit of the quarry, stinging your eyes, coating your tongue. Every breath you take tastes of chalk and iron. Someone nearby begins to sing. Softly, beneath his breath, a lullaby in a language you don't know. It cuts through the din like a thread of silver, a reminder that music once belonged to the living. You find yourself listening, even as you strike, even as your fingers numb, and your shoulders ache, and your knees threaten to give way. The song continues. A prisoner's anthem, a lullaby for the damned. And then at last, the bell rings again. Evening, the work ceases. Hammers fall silent. Prisoners drop their tools like they are weapons finally surrendered. Some fall to their knees. Others simply stand, staring blankly at the horizon, as if expecting it to speak. You are herded back into a line. One by one, the tools are collected, counted, inspected. Any damage is noted. Any blood wiped clean without comment. The guard beside you smirks as he takes your chisel. Still got 10 fingers, he says. Good day. You do not reply. The walk back is slow. Each step feels like it will be the last. Your legs tremble. Your spine curves forward without your permission. The dust clings to your skin, settles in your eyes, worms its way into the corners of your soul. Inside the prison, the lamps have been lit. The light is weak, flickering, as if afraid of what it must illuminate. You return to your cell. Your cellmate glances at you, sees the grey film over your face, the cuts on your knuckles, the way you collapse into the straw without speaking. "Quarry," he says, nodding once. You nod back, slowly, wordlessly. In the corner, something rustles. A rat perhaps, or a beetle. You don't care. You stare at the ceiling. It blurs. Your chest rises and falls. The hammer still echoes in your arms. Your fingers still grip what is no longer there. Sleep does not come quickly, but when it does, it is deep and dreamless. For today, you are not a man. You are a tool. Tomorrow, you will be one again. The sun has not yet risen, but already your stomach gnaws. It begins before your eyes even open. A slow, coiled ache behind your ribs, like something hollow and howling deep inside you. Hunger has a voice now. It whispers through your veins, urging your hands to move, your feet to rise. You obey it as if it were a command from God. You sit up in the darkness, joints crackling like damp twigs. The straw beneath you is damp. Your shirt sticks to your back with cold sweat. Somewhere nearby, a prisoner coughs, long, wet, unbroken, and no one stirs to help. Today is not the quarry. Today, you are sent to the ash ovens, a punishment detail. The smell greets you before you even reach the yard. The sour stink of overcooked grain, scorched wood, and rot. Smoke leaks from the chimneys like breath from a dying animal, curling into the morning sky, staining the air with its bitterness. You are handed a bucket and a scoop, a tray, a cloth. The kitchens, if they can be called that, are stone rooms, blackened by soot and grief. Inside, men move like ghosts, stirring cauldrons with cracked wooden paddles, their eyes glazed over. A few wear gloves, most don't. You are directed to the baking tables. A man beside you gestures without speaking. Scoop from the bin, slap it down, press it flat, slide it onto the sheet. The bin holds a greyish paste, flour and water, or something like it. It smells of old hay and vinegar. You don't ask what's in it. You don't want to know. You scoop, slap, press, slide, again, and again. Your hands soon ache. The paste sticks beneath your nails. You feel it hardening on your wrists. When you accidentally breathe through your nose, the stench almost buckles your knees. Nearby, a guard watches, arms folded. You eat what you make, he says, without looking at you. You keep working. The ovens belch smoke. The fire is fed with scraps of coal, broken wood, sometimes even old cloth, anything that burns. The heat is sudden and punishing. It makes your skin prickle, your mouth dry. By midday, the bread is done, or what passes for it. You are handed a chunk, half-baked, charred around the edges, damp in the middle. It crumbles in your palm, dry as dust and warm like old sweat. You bite down and feel your teeth grind against something that isn't flour. Sand, maybe. Ash. Bone. You chew slowly. The crust scrapes your tongue. The inside sticks to your throat like glue. Your body rebels. It wants to spit it out. But hunger is stronger. You swallow. A boy sits beside you, no older than 13. His cheeks are sunken. His eyes dart like a bird's, never resting. His number is written in crooked ink on his sleeve. He pulls his bread apart in trembling fingers, then pushes half towards you. You look at him. He shrugs. "Doesn't matter," he says, smiling faintly. "I'm not gonna last." You take it. You don't argue. You don't thank him either. Gratitude is dangerous. It makes you remember you're human. The bell rings again. You return to the baking tables. The paste has gone colder, harder to spread. Your hands begin to blister. The bucket is filled again, and again. No one speaks. You see a man scratch at his arms until they bleed. Another slumps forward and is carried out. The guard shrugs. Heat stroke. At sundown, the ovens go dark. You scrape your tools clean with the edge of your spoon. You are allowed to keep a crust, no bigger than your palm. You hide it beneath your sleeve like contraband. The walk back is quiet. The boy is no longer beside you. You ask no questions. Inside your cellmate watches as you sit in the corner, slowly chewing your last piece of bread. He says nothing, but his eyes flicker toward your hands. You break off a piece and pass it to him. He nods. No words. Later, in the dark, you wake to the sound of your own teeth grinding. Your jaw clenched, tongue pressed hard against the roof of your mouth. Hunger has followed you into sleep. It prowls through your dreams like a dog, snapping at scraps, chasing ghosts. You remember the boy, his half smile, his voice. I'm not gonna last. You wonder if that was a confession, or a prophecy. Your belly twists again. Not just from hunger now, but from something deeper. A sickness, not of the body, but of the soul. This bread is not made to feed. It is made to remind you that you do not deserve more. That survival is rationed. That kindness is a debt. You close your eyes and chew your tongue. It tastes of salt. The rats will come soon. The silence is the first thing you notice. Not the absence of noise. True silence. A heavy, pressing quiet that feels like being buried under blankets, soaked in stone. No coughs. No clinks. No footsteps. Even your breath sounds too loud here. They called it solitary. You heard the word like a threat, not a promise. You didn't mean to speak out. Not really. A guard had pushed a woman too hard in the yard. She had fallen, struck her head, curled into herself like paper crumpled in wind. And you fool that you are. You had shouted, just once. Just a single word. Enough. It had earned you a blow to the jaw. And this, a room with no light, no straw, no voices. Just stone and cold, and the hunger you brought with you. They took you down through a narrow door hidden behind a pantry. Downstairs, so steep you had to feel your way with your hands. The walls wept moisture. You stumbled once, knees cracking against the stone. The guard behind you laughed, but it sounded distant, like the echo of a man who had never been alive. Now, you sit in this cell, smaller than any you've seen. The ceiling presses close, barely above your head when you stand. The walls are blackened with rot. The floor is damp. The air is thick, and still, and raw. You try to keep track of time. At first you count heartbeats, but they quicken, then slow, then vanish beneath your fear. You switch to footsteps, but no one walks past. Eventually time becomes a blur, a fog. You sleep, but you don't know when. You wake, but it feels no different than dreaming. You hallucinate. First it's small things, the sound of a flute drifting through the walls, a light in the ceiling that you're sure wasn't there before. Then it becomes people. Your sister's voice calls to you, soft, urgent. She tells you the wheat is high this year. Your son giggles in your ear, the way he did when you lifted him onto your shoulders and spun in the field. Your mother's hands hold your face, then they vanish, and you are left with stone. You scratch at the wall, not to escape. You gave up on that within hours. You scratch just to leave something behind. A mark, a line, a whisper that says, I was here. The wall bleeds dust beneath your nails. The skin on your fingertips splits. You don't care. Once, you scream. You don't mean to. It rises from your chest, like a cough. Sudden and wild, an animal. Your throat burns. Your ears ring. No one comes. You sleep again, curled in the corner, arms wrapped around your knees. You dream of grass, of rain tapping on a tin roof, of bread that smells like bread. But when you wake, your tongue is dry and your mouth tastes of mildew. You try to move, but your legs have stiffened. You crawl to the wall and lean against it. The cold seeps through your back like water. You whisper to yourself, not words, just sounds. Anything to keep the silence from consuming you whole. Then you begin to count cracks in the wall. 1, 2, 3. You lose count. You start again. You scratch another mark into the stone. A line to keep yourself tethered. You hum an old lullaby. One you barely remember, but even your own voice sounds strange now, like it belongs to someone else. And what might be the second day, or the 5th, or the 10th? The door opens. The light stabs your eyes like knives. You scream, covering your face, curling into yourself like a child. The guards say nothing. They wait. You crawl forward on your hands and knees. The floor burns beneath your palms. You blink through tears. You see shadows, figures, outlines of men you barely remember how to stand beside. They take your arms and lift you. Your legs wobble, your knees give way. You are carried up the steps, blinking, moaning softly. The air above is sweet. Not truly, not really, but compared to the tomb you left behind, it tastes of life. Your cellmate is waiting. He does not speak. He helps you lower yourself onto the straw. He covers your feet with his half of the blanket. You weep without sound. And when he speaks, it is only one word. Back. He means back to the world of the living. Back to the rhythm of chains and breath and fire. Back to the clink and the cough and the rationed silence. But something inside you remains in that room beneath the stairs. Some part of you, the part that once dreamed of warm hands and morning fields, has curled into the stone and gone quiet. And in the dark, that part still scratches at the walls, still counting cracks, still whispering, "I was here." It comes in the evening, a folded scrap of privilege passed from guard to scribe, from scribe to prisoner, like a relic of a forgotten world. Paper, a single sheet, yellowed and thin, creased at the corners, slightly damp from the sweat of the man who last held it. Alongside it, a stub of pencil, the wood frayed, the lead dulled, worn to a whisper. You stare at them for a long moment, unsure whether to reach out. The last time you touched paper, it was wrapped around salted pork in the market, or maybe cradling a spool of twine. Maybe you used it to catch ink as you signed a birth certificate, or a death one. You no longer remember which came last. The guard leaves without a word. Your cellmate glances over, then turns away. There is no privacy here, not truly, but something about the shape of the paper, the weight of the pencil, builds a small wall between you and the rest of the cell. Not a real one, but enough. You hold the paper in your hands like it's made of glass. It crinkles slightly, brittle as dried leaves. You lay it across your knees and breathe once, deeply, before beginning. To my dearest Anna, you pause. The pencil does not feel right in your hand. Too light, too short, as if it were never meant to carry the weight of real words. You stare at the single line, then erase it with your sleeve. The graphite smudges, a grey cloud where your wife's name had been. You begin again. To my family, too formal, too far. Dear Thomas, too much. You stop trying to name them, and simply begin. I am well. Lie. They feed us. The work is hard, but I am learning to bear it. Lie. The guards are not cruel. There is order here. I am making peace with it. Lie. Lie. You write these things because you imagine them reading your words aloud, because you know if they read the truth, they will carry your pain in their bones, because a part of you still wants them to sleep at night. You fold the lies carefully into sentences. The food is plain but filling. I am strong. I think often of the fields, of the mornings when the mist curled over the hill, and the chickens called the sun into the sky. You pause. The chickens. You remember them clearly now. How one always pecked at your boot, as though daring you to leave the gate open. You write it down. Just that. The chickens are loud in my memory. You smile. The first in weeks, maybe months. It fades quickly. You try to add more, but the pencil grows shorter with each word. You have to hold it with your fingertips now. Every letter a struggle. You want to say, I have forgotten what day it is. I cannot tell the difference between silence and madness. There are nights I dream of the dark and wake up longing for it. You want to say, there was a boy here. He gave me half his bread. I never saw him again. You want to say, they took me down into the earth and left me there, and I think something inside me stayed behind. But you don't. Instead, you write, I miss your voice. That is truth. That is enough. You sign only your first name. You hesitate before adding anything more. The number on your chest, the one that means more here than your name ever could, stares up at you like a second signature. You do not write it. You fold the letter, though it's not long enough to require folding. Still, the motion feels sacred. You press the crease with your thumb, again and again, until the fold is sharp. You leave it on the edge of your straw mat. A guard comes later. No words. He takes it, tucks it into the pocket of his coat, and walks away. You do not know if it will be sent, or if it will be burned, or if it will be laughed at in some candlelit room where your words are nothing more than entertainment for the idle hands of bureaucrats. But you wrote it. And for now, that is proof that you still remember how to form words. Proof that someone waits beyond these walls. Proof that even when caged, Even when silenced, you are still something more than stone. Later that night, your cellmate asks, "What did you say?" You shake your head. "Nothing." He nods. He doesn't press, but as the light from the torch in the hall dims, you whisper one line to yourself, soft enough that even the rats can't hear. "I miss your voice." Night comes early in the prison, not by the sky's will, but by decree, when the last bell sounds and the guards walk the corridors with shuttered lanterns, slamming each door with practiced finality. Darkness follows not just in absence of light, but in the way voices go quiet, in the way hope retreats. And then she sings. It begins as a hum, low, unsteady, like wind caught in a cracked pane of glass. You hear it through the wall, the thin, rotted wood that separates your cell from the one beside it. The sound is not loud, but it fills the air like incense, rising through the silence and brushing against your skin. You sit up, you listen. The melody shifts, climbing, then falling, then hovering like a breath held too long. It's not a song you know, and yet it feels older than the prison, older than the iron, older than the rules. It feels like something once sung in kitchens, or at cradles, or under trees in summer. Your cellmate doesn't react. "That's her," he says, as if you'd asked. "The widow." He says it like a title. Not an insult, not quite respect either, but with the weight of someone who's seen the walls change shape when her voice rises. "They say she poisoned her husband," he adds. You don't speak, you wait. They also say she was beaten every Sunday, that his boot was heavier than his prayers. The singing continues. You don't care why she's here. You only care that in this place of coughs and commands and coughing commands, someone remembers how to shape duty from breath. You crawl closer to the wall, press your ear to the wood. It's rough and damp and cold, but you don't flinch. Her voice carries better this way. You can hear the cracks in it, the parts where her throat catches, where her notes waver. They are not imperfection. They are proof that she's still human, still real. She pauses once, long enough that you think she's done, and then she speaks. Not loud, just a whisper, maybe to herself, maybe to no one. "Moonlight on lace," she says. "That's what I remember. Dancing in Cork. My skirt was blue, or maybe green." You hold your breath. She laughs, not a mad laugh, a remembering laugh. "I wasn't beautiful," she says, "but I felt like I was." You don't answer. You don't dare. She begins humming again. The same tune. Maybe. It's changed now, slower, like a heartbeat under sleep. You wonder what she looks like. You imagine her with silver hair, eyes sharp as pins, shoulders stooped from carrying too many years. But in your mind's eye, you also see her young, spinning beneath lanterns, skirt fluttering like petals, mouth open in song, joy dripping from her fingertips. You realize you're crying. You wipe your cheek, quick and quiet. The next night, she sings again, and the night after that, it becomes ritual. You wait for it. You lie in the dark, hands folded across your chest, and count the seconds after the final bell until her voice fills the void. She speaks to herself often. His laugh was like a drawer slamming shut. She mutters once. Another time, "I baked bread that smelled like cinnamon and spite." You find yourself answering in your head, imagining the conversation. What color was your skirt? What did the music sound like? Did the lace catch the moonlight? Or did you? On the fourth night, something changes. She sings your name. Not perfectly, not fully, just the syllables. Half a guess, half a memory. But it stops your breath. "Is that you?" she asks. "The one who was in solitary?" You swallow. Then, softly, "Yes. I heard your scream," she says. "The walls do carry, don't they?" You close your eyes, nod. Even though she can't see, she hums again. "You're still here," she says. It's not a question. It's a blessing. And from that night on, the space between your cells becomes a window, not a wall. She tells you about Cork, about dancing in the rain, about a sister who ran away to America, about the way a loaf splits open just right when the flour is warm, about the bruises that fade and the ones that don't. You tell her about your child, how he said bread before father, how he once buried a spoon in the garden to see if it would grow. She laughs until she coughs. You both go quiet. The next night, she sings again, softer than before. And now you know the tune. You hum with her. Not loudly, just enough. Your cellmate pretends not to notice. The guards don't stop it. Even the rats seem to pause when she sings, because in a place built to break and forget, her voice is a thread. A thin, silver thread pulled through the darkness, stitching one soul to another. A lullaby for the forgotten, a hymn for the numbered, a song that says, "You are still here." The morning comes grey and silent. Rain murmurs against the stone outside, soft as breath, as though the sky itself has learned to whisper. It slicks the courtyard in thin sheets, pooling in the cracks between cobblestones. You watch it through the slit in the wall, that small, useless window to a world that no longer includes you. There will be no work today, not because of mercy, there is none here, but because wet stone crumbles poorly and tools slip in the hands of the exhausted. Instead, you are ordered to remain in your cell, a blessing cloaked in boredom. Your cellmate, the quiet one with soot under his fingernails, rises without speaking and sits against the wall. He pulls a shard of stone from the hem of his tunic, a smuggled treasure, and begins to scratch. You've seen him do this before, always on days without labor. His knees drawn up, his lips moving in silent count. You move closer. He's marking the wall again. Not randomly, not like a child idling with chalk. Each scratch is neat, measured, aligned with the rows already there. You count. 20, 40, 60, more. He stops, carves one more, then leans back staring at the marks, as though waiting for them to speak. "My boy is 9 today," he says. His voice is raw, as if it hasn't been used in weeks. You blink. "He was 3 when they brought me here," he continues. Still learning to tie his shoes. "Couldn't say ours right." You nod, unsure what to say. He doesn't expect an answer. He stares at the wall. "I've marked every day. One line for each morning I've woken up without him. Some days I forget what his voice sounded like. Other days, I hear it so clearly I think I'll go mad." He glances at the ceiling. "I used to worry he'd forget me. Now I hope he has." The silence that follows is heavier than chains. You look at your own wall. Empty, plain. The stone smooth with time and breath. You have never marked the days. You don't know how long it's been. The season? The year. You've let time bleed into itself. One endless stretch of hunger and ash. Later that morning, another man down the corridor begins scratching his wall too, slowly, quietly, one mark at a time. Then another joins. And another. No one speaks of it. But all along the prison, on this rain-soaked day, men begin counting, not to plan escape, not to mark sentences, but to remember, to pin the soul to something solid. A name, a day, a child. In the corner of your cell, you pick up a dull rock. You test it against the wall. It drags like chalk. Satisfying. You draw your first mark. One line, just one. It feels like a rebellion. At mealtime, the bread is soft. A rare thing. The crust is warm. Not good, but not sour. The guards speak little today. Perhaps the rain has dampened even their malice. After the meal, you sit back against the wall and stare at the mark you made. Your cellmate is carving again. "A birthday's not meant to be remembered like this," he mutters. "You say it still is, though." He pauses, then nods. That night, the widow sings again. But it's not a lullaby. It's a celebration, a waltz, the rhythm of feet across wood, of laughter in candlelight, of skirts swaying and wine spilled and the joy of being alive. You close your eyes and imagine her dancing in her cell, spinning, arms raised, eyes shut, the shadow of lace clinging to her breath. You join her, not with feet, but with memory. A cake, baked too long, a candle bent in the middle. You remember laughter. No punishment follows. Perhaps the guards are listening too. Perhaps they remember something worth marking. In the dark, you run your fingers over the scratch you made. Tomorrow, you will make another. Not to count suffering, but to claim time. Even now, because even in chains, the heart keeps time. But it was still a day worth remembering. It began as so many things in prison do, with a whisper. Not loud, not dramatic, not shouted in the yard, or carved into stone. Just a sentence dropped like a pebble into still water. "They're digging." You heard it from the man who stirred ash in the kitchen hearth. His fingers always blackened. his voice too low to echo. He passed it like a breath. No name, no time, no plan. Only that it was happening, somewhere, underfoot. Men were burrowing toward the sky. At first you did not believe him. But then came signs, small ones. A shovel head that vanished. A patch of dirt under a bed that seemed too clean. A guard with a limp who suddenly no longer walked that route. You said nothing. And waited. They were not men you knew. You hadn't seen them in the yard. They were part of a different rotation. Perhaps the quarry team, or the trench diggers near the north wall. But their names passed through lips, like prayers. One was a blacksmith's apprentice, another a former soldier. The digging happened at night, beneath the floor of the old chapel, a forgotten stone building near the back of the compound, no longer used. The priest had died the year before, and no replacement had come. The altar was gone, and the pews stacked like firewood. The floor, they said, was hollow beneath. 3 nights of dirt under fingernails and hearts hammering in silence. But you listened, watched, waited. On the 4th night, the widow's song did not come. The air was tight, thick, as though the stone itself held its breath. At midnight, the silence shattered. A shout, then another, then the crack of rifles. You sat up before your eyes, even opened fully. The sound was unmistakable. Gunfire in stone corridors, louder than thunder, sharper than thought. Footsteps thundered past your door. Screams echoed. Not of pain, not yet, but of alarm. The guards were shouting. Metal rang against metal. Doors slammed. Then came the 3rd sound. A scream that ended too suddenly. You rose, moved to the slit in the wall. You couldn't see the yard, only the rain, only the sky. But you saw the light of the search torches flashing in circles. Saw shadows running, bodies falling. The escape had failed. When morning came, it brought silence again. A quiet so deep, even the rats seemed still. At roll call, 3 were missing, then found. 2 had been shot. Their bodies left in the yard as warning. Faces uncovered, eyes open. You recognized one, the blacksmith's apprentice. You remembered him humming once, over a fire, shaping a hook that would never hold anything. The 3rd was alive. Barely. They brought him through the corridor at midday, dragging his body like a sack of grain. Blood trailed behind. One leg twisted wrong. He did not cry out. He had no teeth left to do so. They punished the rest of the block that evening. Not with lashes, not with isolation, but with stillness. No food, no water, no light. For 24 hours, you sat in the dark and listened to your stomach turn in on itself. Your throat dried to paper. The widow did not sing. She did not speak. No one did. When the light returned, and the meal came, dry bread, no water, the silence remained. Something had shifted. Even the guards were quieter. A rat died in the corner. You buried it under a scrap of cloth. Your cellmate spoke once. You thought about running. It was not a question. You nodded. He stared at the wall for a long time, then added, "So did I." You wanted to ask why he didn't, but you already knew. That night, you dreamt of escape, but not the tunnel. You dreamt of waking beneath a tree, of wind in your hair, of sunlight that didn't burn, and bread that didn't scrape your tongue. You dreamt of walking alone, of silence that meant peace, not punishment. When you awoke, the widow was humming again. Not the waltz, not the lullaby, something new, something low, a funeral song. You sat against the wall, eyes closed, listening to the notes thread themselves into the stone. You remembered the men who dug, the man who no longer had a name, and the sound of chains that didn't break. Freedom had become a cruel word, one you no longer said aloud. It began with a cough. Not yours. Not yet. Someone in the next corridor. Short, sharp, dry, the kind that lodges behind the ribs and rattles against bone. You barely noticed at first. In a place where the walls breathe and men groan in their sleep, a cough is just another part of the rhythm. But then came the second, then another, then dozens, rising and falling like waves crashing against stone. By midday, the air had changed. It smelled different, not of sweat or rot or iron, but of something sweet, foul and sweet, like overripe fruit, left too long in the sun, like a wound turning black. Your cellmate noticed first. You asked nothing. There was nothing to ask. You began to sweat even in the cold. They walked more quickly now, keys clinking, boots clicking like metronomes on borrowed time. They wore scarves over their mouths. Thick gloves, some no longer opened cells at all. And when they did, it was with caution. That evening you heard the widow cough. Just one. But it silenced the corridor. She didn't sing that night. The fever moved fast, a wind with no direction. Men collapsed during roll call. Some were dragged away. Some were left where they fell. The stone floor became a grave for the breathing and the dead alike. You were taken from your cell, not for punishment, not for work, but to care. They handed you a rag, a bucket of brown water, and sent you into a chamber with 20 men on the floor, each wrapped in blankets too thin to matter. The smell hit you first, thick, soupy, alive. The smell of bodies losing the fight. One man reached for your hand. His fingers trembled. His eyes were clouded. He asked for his mother. He was 50. You wiped his face, gave him a sip of water. The bucket was almost empty. You didn't know if it helped. By nightfall, 4 were dead. They didn't carry them out. There weren't enough bodies left to carry them. You found the boy again, the one who once gave you half his bread. He lay in the corner, wrapped in a coat too large, shivering so hard his teeth clicked. His eyes met yours. "I'm cold," he said. You pressed your palm to his forehead. It burned. You gave him what water you had left. He smiled, not with joy, but with relief, as if he knew this was the end, and he was glad someone would witness it. You sat beside him, held his hand. He held back, for hours, until his grip loosened, and did not return. You did not cry. You folded his arms across his chest, and pulled the coat higher. You whispered a song, the one the widow used to sing. It felt thin in your mouth, worn like thread drawn too many times through too many needles. But it was all you had. You returned to your cell before sunrise. Covered in sweat and breath and sorrow, you collapsed onto the straw. Your cellmate stared at you, eyes wide, face pale. "Did you touch the sick?" he asked. You didn't answer. He moved to the far corner and turned his face to the wall. The widow's voice came again that night, faint. A lullaby for the ones who didn't make it. Not words, just melody. A river of sound for the dead to float on. You lay still and listened, your fingers aching, your throat dry. You had not caught the fever. Not yet. But something inside you had changed. Something had shifted. You had held a boy as he died. You had wiped blood from a stranger's lips. You had seen men become bodies, and bodies become numbers. And still you breathed. Still you counted. Still you endured, even as the fever wind moved through the halls like a ghost with no name. The flame was no bigger than a thumbprint, flickering, unsteady, carried in a chipped clay dish, the kind used to catch water beneath a leak. It should have meant nothing, but in a place carved from shadow, where light was a memory rationed thinner than bread, it felt like a miracle. You didn't ask where it came from. The guard who left it said nothing. No threats, no sneers, just slid it through the bars and walked away. The candle was already lit, stubby, its wax scarred by older flames, leaning as if tired. It sat in your palm like something living. You held it gently. Your cellmate eyed it with suspicion. "Trick," he muttered. You shook your head. "It's too small for that." He grunted and turned back to the wall. You placed it on the stone between you, where its weak light drew trembling shadows across the floor. The flame danced as though startled by its own presence. It illuminated so little. The edge of the straw, the glint of iron in the chain, the dirt beneath your nails, but even that was more than the usual darkness, where breath and thought became the same. You stared into it for hours, not watching, remembering. It brought back the glow of lamplight on your mother's face, the golden halo behind your wife as she bent to tend the fire, the shine of candles on your child's birthday cake, flickering while he blew and laughed and missed them all on the first try. You remembered warmth. You hadn't known how much you'd forgotten it. The flame hissed once, guttered, then righted itself. You reached into your coat, the one you wore for work, thick with grime, and pulled out a scrap of cloth. You laid it beside the flame, careful not to smother it. You didn't speak. You didn't need to. The light was enough. You found yourself reaching for something more. Not the wall. Not the marks. But memory. You pulled the corner of the blanket over your lap and began to trace shapes into the dust with your fingertip. A curve, a line, the rough shape of a tree, a hill, a house. They were clumsy, childlike, but in the candle's glow, they felt sacred. You heard the widow humming, faint and distant. Even she softened her song in the presence of this flame. It became prayer, not to be saved, but to be remembered. The next day the candle was gone, taken before you woke. No trace left, no note, just the bare stone where it had rested, now cold and dark once more. You thought you dreamed it, but when you sat up, your cellmate looked at you. Not long, not with softness, but with acknowledgement. It was real, he said. Return to the wall. But that day, when the guards led you out for labour, the sun did not feel quite so cruel, the chains not quite so sharp. You walked a little straighter, carried your tools a little lighter. In your chest, a glow remained, not of hope, but of something smaller, quieter. You began to write again. Not letters, not truth, memory. You tore a corner from your shirt, just a sliver, and rubbed it against a stone till it frayed. Then, with a shard of charcoal from the oven fire, you began to write. One word, then another, just pieces. Rain, apricots, blue ribbon, bread crust, the smell of soap, a door left open. You wrote until the cloth was black, then tucked it beneath your pallet. Your cellmate never asked, but he gave you his shirt to sleep on that night. In return, the next morning before the door opened, you whispered to the darkness, "Thank you, not to a man, not to a god, to the flame," because even a single light, once seen, can echo for days in the corridors of the soul. It was the sound of footsteps that told you he wasn't one of them. Not the boots of a guard, hard, impatient, echoing like warnings through the corridor. No, these were slower, softer, measured, as if each step was chosen with care. A rhythm you hadn't heard in months, perhaps years. It made your body tense, though you didn't know why. The key turned in the door, but no command followed. No bark, no shove, just a pause. Then a shape appeared in the doorway, backlit by weak daylight, wrapped in brown cloth and dust. He wore no rifle, no number, just a leather-bound book tucked under his arm, and a cross of brass around his neck. A missionary, not here to save you, just to count you. He stepped inside, careful not to touch the walls. His face was pale, not with fear, but with distance. The kind of paleness that comes from not being here long enough to belong. He nodded to your cellmate, then turned to you. "What's your name?" he asked. You blinked. The question struck you like cold water. Not your number, not your weight, not your crime. Your name. It sat behind your teeth like a stone. Heavy, familiar, almost painful. You hadn't spoken it in so long that it felt foreign, like a song half remembered. You looked down at your tunic. 4, 2, 6. You waited. You swallowed. Then said it, quietly, once. The sound of it startled you. He nodded, gently, wrote something in his ledger, not hurried, not harsh, then looked up again. "Do you know what day it is?" You hesitated. "No." "Do you know how long you've been here?" You shrugged. He didn't press. He asked other questions. Simple ones. Age, hometown, occupation. You answered them with slow words, unsure if you were telling the truth or just repeating what you used to believe about yourself. Then he asked, "Would you like someone to know you're alive?" You opened your mouth, then closed it. The thought of reaching beyond these walls, of sending your name, your voice, your breath into the world again felt dangerous. Like lighting a fire in dry woods. Still, you nodded. He tore a scrap of parchment from his book. Wrote something. Folded it. "I'll try," he said. He placed the folded paper on the stone between you, though you knew you wouldn't be allowed to keep it. Then he stood. Your cellmate asked him nothing. But before leaving, the man turned and said softly, "There is more of you than this place." Then he stepped into the corridor, and the door closed behind him. You stared at the space where he'd stood, as if the air still held his shape. More of you than this place. The words echoed. You sat there for hours, repeating your name under your breath, again and again, letting it become familiar once more. You whispered it into your cupped hands, into the straw, into the cracks in the stone. It felt like fire, It felt like truth. That night, the widow sang a song you hadn't heard before. It was in Irish, you thought. Soft, rising and falling like waves on a faraway shore. You didn't know the words, but the melody curled around your name and held it. Your cellmate spoke once. Before sleep. Don't forget it again, he said. You didn't answer. You didn't need to, because now you had a name again. And the stone had heard it, and the shadows had listened. And no matter what tomorrow held, quarry or trench or silence, the world outside the walls had been reminded. You were still here. You had a name. And it still fit your mouth like something you'd never stopped owning. In a place built from neglect and chains. Small acts of kindness take on a weight far greater than their size. It was a morning like any other, grey light seeping through the slit in the wall, the cold biting at your skin beneath your threadbare tunic. You noticed the boy at the end of the hall, fingers trembling as he struggled to sew a loose button back onto his shirt. His eyes flicked nervously towards the guards, who patrolled like vultures searching for weakness. The button was nothing special. Tarnished brass, scratched and dull. But it was all the boy had to hold his shirt closed against the biting cold. You found a needle, bent, rusted, and some thread scavenged from your own torn clothing. Your hands were stiff, muscles numb from days in the quarry, but you worked slowly, deliberately, feeling the thread pull through fabric as a prayer to something beyond these walls. The boy watched, eyes wide, as you mended the button, fastening it with a care that spoke louder than words. It won't last long, he said softly. Maybe, you replied. But it will hold for tonight. He smiled faintly, a fragile thing, like a sparrow's wing, and nodded. Later, as the afternoon sun retreated behind the prison's stone walls, the boy returned a favour. Half a peach, smuggled in from the kitchen by a sympathetic cook, was pressed into your palm. The flesh was soft and dripping, sticky with sweetness that felt almost like memory. You bit into it carefully, the juice running down your chin, the taste bursting like fire on your tongue. Tears welled, but you blinked them away. The sweetness was both blessing and curse, a reminder of the world outside, and how far you were from it. In the days that followed, small kindnesses threaded through the gloom like sparks. A man shared his blanket, folded thin and moth-eaten. Another passed a scrap of dried meat. The widow's song softened, filled with hope rather than sorrow. You found yourself leaning into these moments, the warmth of shared bread, the brush of hands as you passed tools, the quiet nods that said, "We remember who we are." In your cell you sewed buttons onto clothes that would soon be ripped again. You mended what you could, stitching not just fabric but fractured souls. You kept the needle close, a talisman against the darkness. One night, when the prison was silent, except for the widow's soft singing, you felt something shift inside you. Not hope, not joy, something quieter, a thread of human light that refused to be extinguished. You closed your eyes and pressed your fingers against your chest, feeling the steady beat beneath your ribs. You were still here, still fighting, still human. The day began like any other, grey and slow, with mist clinging to the stone walls and damp in the air that felt heavier than usual. The usual clatter of boots echoed through the corridors, prisoners lining up like shadows pressed against cold stone, their breath visible in the morning chill. But today, something shifted. A name, not a number. A name you had come to think forgotten. The whisper ran through the block like a secret wind, rustling the straw in your cell, stirring the air thick with despair. Someone was to be released. Not you. Not in silence, but walking free. Your cellmate watched as the guards led her from the line. Her steps were slow, measured, but each one seemed to pull at the air like a thread unspooling. Before the gate, she stopped, turned, looked at you, at all of you, with eyes bright, fierce. She reached into her blanket, pulling free a scrap of fabric, torn and faded, embroidered with a patchwork of stitches, her number sewn into the cloth and thread frayed from years of wear. She handed it to you. "Don't forget who you were," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the morning chill like a flame. You took the scrap, fingers trembling. It was more than cloth. It was a promise, a memory, a piece of the world you thought had been swallowed by stone and shadow. As she passed through the gate, the sound of the latch closing behind her echoed in your chest like a final breath. You pressed the fabric to your lips. It smelled faintly of rain and sweat and something sweeter. Hope. For the first time in months, maybe years, you believed in something fragile. Not freedom, not justice, but release. Release was a whisper, a thread, a breath. You vowed to hold it close, to carry it through the days of hunger and labor and silence, because in the prison's darkness, even the smallest light could never be snuffed out. That night, the widow's song was softer, gentler, a lullaby for those left behind. You clutched the scrap to your chest as you lay on the straw, and for a moment, just a moment, you allowed yourself to dream. There was no fanfare, no trumpets, no cheers, just a paper, a coat, and a silent guard whose eyes said more than any words could. You stood at the gate, the iron bars cold against your palms, the weight of your number still heavy on your chest. The courtyard stretched before you, empty, grey, like a canvas waiting to be painted with the colours of a life you had almost forgotten. The guard slid a worn coat over your shoulders. It smelled of smoke and wood smoke, of damp earth and forgotten fires. You pulled it close, letting the fabric wrap around you like a shield against the chill. And your feet, once shod in rough boots, now touched the ground bare and uncertain. The stones beneath you were cold, unfamiliar, like the world itself had shifted while you were gone. You stepped beyond the gate. The wind hit your face, sharp, strange, like a stranger's breath. People passed by, heads down, eyes averted. You tried to catch their gaze, a glance, a sign that you belonged here still, but no one looked. You were a ghost walking through a town that had moved on without you. The street smelled of wood smoke and rotting leaves, of rain-soaked dirt and distant markets, but it was alien. You blinked against the sky, a vast grey dome that seemed too wide for your small steps. You walked barefoot, hesitant, unsure. The ground felt strange beneath your feet. Rough stones, mud, puddles reflecting a world you no longer recognized. Your number still hung in your mind. 426. The prison's tattoo burned beneath your skin, a mark that would never fade. You tried to recall your name. It came slowly, a whisper on the wind, a breath beneath your ribs. You were free, but freedom tasted like dust, like ash, like a story told in whispers and half-remembered dreams. The town moved around you, the market bustling with voices and bartering, children chasing sticks, women gathering water from the well. Life pulsed beyond the walls, but you felt hollow, disconnected, a man without a place. You found a tree at the edge of the street, its branches stretched wide, leaves rustling softly in the breeze. You sat beneath it, closed your eyes, and let the world slip away. For now, the chains had fallen, but their echo lingered. You return, but the town does not remember you. The path from the prison gate to the village winds through overgrown fields and cracked stones, dust rising with each uncertain step. The air is thick with scents of earth and rain, but also of change, unfamiliar and sharp. Houses stand as they always did, but their doors are shut tight, windows shuttered against the world. The fences that once marked your family's land are broken, wild grass spilling over the boundaries. Where your home should be, only a hollow remains. A foundation cracked, walls crumbled, the ghost of a hearth long cold. You approach the village square, hoping for a familiar face. Instead, you meet furrowed brows and sideways glances. Children stop their play, whispering behind hands. The baker's wife tightens her grip on the basket she carries. Men pause, their laughter faltering. Your name, spoken aloud, brings no warmth. It draws silence, confusion, suspicion. You are a stranger, a ghost with no grave. You remember the market stalls where you bartered for fresh bread, the smithy's hammer ringing like a heartbeat, the church bell tolling across the fields. Now all these sounds feel distant, like echoes from a life lived through someone else's eyes. You wander the streets, barefoot, tracing the familiar shapes of walls and stones, trying to anchor yourself in a place that no longer holds you. At the edge of town, beneath an ancient oak, you sit. The bark is rough against your back. The wind rustles through leaves, whispering secrets you cannot catch. You close your eyes and listen. In your mind, the laughter of children returns, the scent of rain on dry earth, the touch of a mother's hand, warm and steady. But when you open your eyes, there is only the grey sky and empty streets. You sleep beneath the oak, wrapped in a blanket that smells of dust and prison. Dreams come, fractured and fleeting, of fields you once tended, of voices calling your name. with doors opening, welcoming you home. When you wake, the sun is low. Shadows stretch across the village like fingers. You rise, knowing you are no longer part of this world. But still, you carry it with you. The memory of stone and light, of life before the chains. And though the town has forgotten, you will remember. You find work as a gardener, not by choice, but by necessity. The village offers no welcome, no warmth, only wary glances and whispered questions. Hands that once held tools with purpose now tremble as they grasp hoes and spades. The earth beneath your fingers feels both foreign and familiar, cold, resistant, yet willing to yield if coaxed with care. You rise before dawn, pulling your coat tight against the chill. The sky is a wash of grey and pale gold, the kind of morning that holds both promise and quiet mourning. You step into the garden, where rows of wilted herbs and stubborn roots struggle through cracked soil, desperate for light. Your hands move slowly, methodical. You dig, you plant, you prune, each motion a prayer for renewal, for growth, for a future that feels just out of reach. You rarely speak of the prison. The words catch in your throat, heavy with silence. But sometimes, when the wind carries the cry of a child, or the bark of a dog, memories surge unbidden. The hunger, the cold, the chains, the faces, the widow, the boy, the men who never left. You write these memories in your mind, weaving them into stories you tell only to the earth. Tales of resilience and sorrow, of small kindnesses that shone like stars in the darkness. One evening, as the sun dips low, you sit beneath a tree and pull a worn notebook from your coat pocket. The pages are yellowed, edges frayed, but within them lives your story. Not the one recorded by guards or etched in ledgers, but the one only you can tell. You write of the widow's song, soft and haunting, of the boy's smile, fleeting and brave, of the candle's flicker, a mercy in the night. Your hand moves steadily across the page, each word a thread stitching you back into the fabric of the world. You hope these stories will survive when your name fades, when your number is forgotten, because history may forget the prisoner, but it cannot forget the story. And in telling it, you reclaim yourself. A man who endured, a soul who refused to be broken, a voice that will echo beyond stone and shadow. Years later, when your hands have grown too weak to hold a pen, you keep a candle stub in a small wooden box. It is no larger than a child's fist, worn smooth from years of handling. The wax is cracked, the wick blackened but unburnt, a fragment of a flame that once whispered hope into the cold. You light it once more before you go, the fragile glow casting trembling shadows across the wall. The flame flickers gently, as if remembering the touch of your breath, the warmth of your spirit. It dances quietly, illuminating the rough stone, the scratches and marks etched over time, the silent testament of a life survived. You see in that light the faces of those you carried with you, the widow's song weaving through the darkness, the boy's brave smile, the men whose names were swallowed by time. They are here, in the flicker, in the shadow, in the quiet pulse of flame against stone. You are no longer a prisoner. You are a person who endured, a soul who carved stories from silence. And now, your story is finally told. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth seep into your bones. The flame bends low, then rises once more. A beacon that will outlast you, that will travel through the years, carrying your name and memory beyond these walls. As the last embers fade from this forgotten story, may it leave a glow in your own heart. Thank you for walking this path of silence and survival. Subscribe if you wish to walk again through the silent pages of history. As the last light fades from these stone walls, may the echoes of this story stay with you. Thank you for walking this path of silence and survival. If the journey moved you, subscribe and return anytime you need a story to remind you of what it means to endure. What part of this story stayed with you the most? The silence, the suffering, or the scraps of kindness that broke through the dark?